Okay, first of all, when we start sewing a yoke to a dress shirt on the back, which joins to the front, we have to first cut out our two pieces. One will be on the outside and one will be the facing. So I had to cut according to this pattern on the fold. Now sometimes yokes will have a seam running down the center back, which is fine. However, when I'm making men's dress shirts, I actually hate that. So if I were to change the pattern, I will adjust it so that I can cut it on the fold and then I'll have one piece. Otherwise, if you're okay with having a seam down the center back, by all means keep it as is, but in this case we are going to do two pieces cut on the fold for the yoke. Now keep in mind, I'm doing this tutorial because I don't like any hand sewing when I don't need to do it. I will say that basting, hand basting is fine. It's just a temporary stitch, but that is taken out as soon as I am done with it. So I don't do any slip stitching on this yoke at all, or any yokes, whether it be for a jacket, a men's dress shirt, or God forbid a women's dress shirt, which I despise. So this is what we do. Now we're going to show you how to put this together in one go without any hand stitching, and it is very straightforward and very simple. So let us get into that. The first thing that you have to do is mark any of your notches that need to be marked on both the facing and the outside piece to the world that will show your sewing to the completed project. Now here I have a notch which will indicate where your sleeves will eventually fit properly. That needs to be marked, otherwise you're gonna have to go back to the pattern piece and remeasure and find that spot again. So do that. That is very important. Now, since it's cut on the fold, I am desperately trying to get this mark out of here by ironing like crazy. So we will get into the sewing part now. Okay, the next step in forming your yoke without hand sewing is to baste together these three layers of the yoke and its facing, which is on the other side, and the back piece. As you can see here, this is the back piece, which I have the center right here as was cut on the fold. So make sure we're aware of what we're doing here before we continue on making any permanent stitches. Here I use pins with the flower head up, showing to indicate that if I have fabrics that have the same wrong side and right side, I usually use this to indicate what the right side is. Now you can use other methods, that's fine, but this is mine. It's very simple. And what I do is I then put the right side together for this yoke and then the wrong side together for the wrong side of the back piece to the wrong side of the yoke, so that when it's turned right side out, when it's done, you'll have two right sides of the yoke facing out the way it's supposed to. Now this is the only kind of hand stitching we will be doing. If you choose to do the same as I end up basting all three layers together so that they're even and they won't shift, and we're good as golden. So this is our next step. Now we make a permanent stitch of the seam allowance on the back to join the three pieces, the yoke to the outside world, the back piece, and the facing of the yoke. Now, how we'll join the front to the back is next up. Okay, so at this point, because it's just me filming, it's very hard to do the sewing step without taking pauses in between. I have sewn the 3 layers together of the 2 yoke pieces and the back piece at the top here, or the back top anyway. And I still have my basting in, but as you can see, now that these 3 layers are connected and they're all even, what I now have to do is firstly remove this basting. We don't need it anymore. That was just, as I said before, just to keep all 3 layers even and to prevent slipping so that you won't have any problems in the near future. So after I remove this basting, what I then do is press this edge, and then I'm going to separate them like so. I will separate this piece, and then there's the back piece, and then the other yoke facing. Now, one of these has to be folded towards the bottom so that we can separate the 2 yoke pieces from interfering with each other in the next step. So once again, we're going to remove the basting, press this, press one of these yoke pieces down towards the bottom, and then we're going to then finish this seam so that it doesn't create any problems for wear and tear use in the future. Okay, we have finished the part where we sewed the seam on the back piece, which is the right side. We sewed all 3 layers together, as I'll show you right here. I've sewn all 3 layers together. Then I serged this edge, or finished it, and then I pressed the seam towards the bottom, leaving this yoke facing pressed down with it, where the other yoke piece, as you can see here, is pressed away from the other yoke piece. So I've got this yoke piece and this seam pressed down towards the bottom of the garment. So now at this point, if you choose to do it, you will need to do a top stitch along this seam. This is a completely optional section of putting the yoke together, because if you want to do it, fine. If you don't, you know, leave it. I mean, you can do several rows, you can do just one or none. It's completely up to you, and whatever you want is your deal. So, because I was told that somebody wanted this top stitch, I have to do that. So this part is just now aesthetics, and I will skip that part so that we can go on to the next part. Okay, the next part is to add the front pieces to the joining yoke part that we sewed to the back piece. Now keep in mind that we are using the yoke piece that is attached to the right side of the back. I have done my top stitching here. This is the back piece and the part of the yoke that is showing to the outside world, and then we have the other yoke facing that is pressed down. So we are only concerned with attaching the front 2 pieces to the yoke piece that is the single piece, not the other facing piece, just this piece. So what we got to do is we got to adhere to the rules, right sides together. This is the right side of the left side of the front. So right sides together. I basted that piece with that, and then same thing to the right side, right sides to right sides, baste those 2 layers together, and the next part is the part that puts it all together. Okay, so putting this all together, now that we've basted the front 2 pieces to the back yoke, which the right side of the back piece is outside, so right sides together as I had mentioned, We've basted those together. Now we're not sewing this permanently yet, because that is for the next step, because we want to do it all in one like we did with the back piece and the 2 yoke pieces. So what we do is we collect the 2 front pieces together and the back piece. Now this may sound confusing, but what we do is we're going to roll them up together. I know it's a little difficult with one hand, but anyway, we're rolling them up together. And we're going to do it as tight as we can or as loose as we can, but I would prefer a little bit more tighter. Now, do you see this spacing of the yoke that we pressed down previously? It is loose from the assembly of the back piece and the front 2 pieces, that the 2 front pieces are joined together here. Now we're going to then take this other yoke facing and do the same as you did to this piece from the front. We're just going to baste it again, because as I mentioned before, we want to put them all even with no slipping and no seam allowance tampering. I don't know what the word is, but we really don't want to make any mistakes. Now if you want to make that back piece and the front 2 pieces a tighter roll, by all means. I am not very good at that. So if you're wondering, don't be so concerned with those the back piece and the front pieces being so pressed right now, unless it's a seam that you had just done. That's important, but for the 2 front pieces and the back piece, we shouldn't be concerned, because what we're going to do is we're going to pull it out from this tube that we're constructing here, and then we're going to turn it right side out. So my next step for the left and the right sides of the front connected to the back, we're going to baste it together again and then sew it permanently, finish the edge, and then we're going to do the finishing touch by turning it right side out. Okay, here we have most of the yoke facing attached to the shoulders on the front and the back yoke piece, and you can visually see what's going on now, I hope. Like I said, I'm a one-man show today, so it's going to be kind of tough. So here I have the front 2 pieces rolled up together with the back, and as the facing was pressed down away from the top of the outside to the back piece, I brought that piece up, and then I sewed this, or well, basted this together again with the other 2 front pieces. As you can see, there's 2 different lines of basting there. Now what's really important at this point is not to get this rolled up mess sewn together with your shoulder seam here, with the yoke attached to the back and the front, because if it does, oh my gosh, you gotta go do it over again, and what a mess. So yeah, make sure that visually, as you can see, it's one big tube. So don't sew this part to this part, because then, yeah, like I said, it'll be a little bit of a mess. So at this point, we're going to sew this shoulder piece and yoke back and front to the right side of the back, front, and yoke piece together. And then at this point, I think after you sew your permanent stitch, it may not be necessary to worry about pressing it at this point, because once you turn it right side out, when it's completely done, you're going to then press the seam towards the bottom like we did with the back side of the yoke. So on to the next part. Okay, we've now sewn and finished the edges of the yoke, the 2 fronts together, and as you can see, as I mentioned before, the front pieces and the back piece are all rolled up to be encased within the 2 yoke pieces. Now that we know that that's all done, what we then do is take either end of the open sides of the yoke and pull the assembly of the front and back pieces out. and then we'll have the yoke turned right side out, and basically at this point your yoke is done. Okay, as before, the step before this, we had the back piece and the front two pieces rolled up into a tube that the two yoke pieces encased, and the directions were to then take one open side of the yoke and take the front pieces and the back piece and pull them through to out one side. Don't try and pull one this way and one the other way. That probably won't work. I've never tried it, but you know, you never know. But for me, I just take the two pieces and pull them out in one way. And then now that it is right side out, I have the right side of the fronts connected to the right side of the back, and you can see that the facing on the wrong side is completely encased together. As we can see, if you open up this and look at the yoke together, I have my finished edges on the back and on the two front pieces as well. Now, if you were wanting to top stitch, I did it before, but I realized that that wasn't the way to go, so I removed it, and I'm going to start again. Make sure when you do your top stitch that it's done after this is completed, because then you'll get this ridge forming on the wrong side, and it's a little goofy looking, not at all what you may want unless that's what you're going for, but you want to maybe top stitch on this side of the yoke and this side, the inner side. So as you can see, both the seams are pressed towards into the yoke and not down here and not down there. That's how it's going to end up. So that basically is the completed yoke piece, and as you pull them out, both sides will do the same thing. They will end up coming right side out on both sides. Now at this point, before you add the collar and the neckband and your sleeves, this is a part where you need to baste these two layers together so that they're not shifting. You baste it here and on the other side, on the left side, and along your neck, your back of the collar area where that is going to be attached, just so that they don't slip. That is pretty much straightforward, and that pretty much completes how we do a yoke on a dress shirt or a coat that follows the same pattern and has two pieces, the outside piece and the facing, with the front and the back piece all connected together. This is a man's dress shirt, and I believe that, you know, I've done this so many times that, you know, I just do it without thinking, and now that I'm showing how to do this, it's actually not as easy as I thought. So I'm doing the best I can with one hand, and like I said, it's all me. So I hope this helped. And if there's any questions, just, you know, holler my way and see if I can clear up any confusion, or if there's any additional questions, you know, throw them my way and I will get to that as soon as I can. Otherwise, that is your finished yoke, attaching the back to the fronts. For reinforcement or looks or whatever the yoke is there for, that is it. So, if you do want anything else, the only other thing at this point is to do your top stitching for your aesthetics, and that could be optional. You can leave it or do whatever you like. Okay, so that completes the yoke instructions. I hope this helped, and this to me was pretty minimal hand sewing. I always hand base things, because if I do hand sew, I'm not exactly sure how strong I can make it unless it's for little tiny areas. Otherwise, this is completely done by machine. Otherwise, you know, if you want to do it the other way, you know, feel free, but this is the way I always do it, and it works every single time. Okay, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.